Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. Before we get started, do us a quick favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. Now imagine a group of really passionate citizens, not bound by like government red tape and working really hard to actually make a real difference. That's kind of the heart of NGOs in India. And today, we're diving deep into their world, exploring their, roles, challenges, and how they fit into this bigger picture of governance. This is especially relevant for our UPSC aspirants and students, and really anyone who's curious about like the driving forces behind India's development.
Yeah, it is fascinating how NGOs have become these integral players in India's growth story.
Right. So to get us all on the same page, let's start with like the basics. What exactly is an NGO? It might seem pretty straightforward, but there's often more to it than meets the eye.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the term non-governmental organization is pretty self-explanatory, but the real essence lies in their independence from government control and their focus on social causes. Like you said, they're formed by ordinary citizens who are driven by a desire to address issues that might be overlooked by those traditional systems, and their funding can come from a bunch of different sources, which makes things even more complex.
Okay, so we've got citizen-led initiatives, independence from the government, and diverse funding streams. That paints a pretty interesting picture. But let's bring this to life with some real-world examples. What kind of work are NGOs actually doing on the ground in India?
Well, the scope of their work is incredibly vast. One major area is providing essential services, especially in regions where the government's reach is limited. Think of organizations providing shelter to the homeless or delivering aid during those natural disasters.
It's like they step in to bridge the gap, making sure that basic needs are met, even in really difficult circumstances.
Exactly. Beyond just the basic services, though, NGOs are also leading the way in advocating for various rights. The Right to Information Act, that landmark legislation that actually empowered citizens to hold the government accountable, wouldn't even be possible without all the hard work from these NGOs.
Speaking of rights, one case that really stuck out to us in our research was the Vedanta versus POSCO case. This wasn't just about providing services, it was about challenging these powerful entities and protecting vulnerable communities.
Yeah, that case was a defining moment for tribal rights here in India. Both Vedanta and POSCO, these major players in the mining and steel industries, they proposed projects in areas that were inhabited by indigenous communities. Recognizing the potential harm to the environment and the livelihoods of these communities, several NGOs actually took a stand. They challenged these projects in court. And their efforts ultimately led to a Supreme Court ruling that recognized the importance of protecting tribal land and their cultural heritage.
So they weren't just giving aid, they were shaping legal precedent and making sure that development didn't come at the cost of marginalization. It really makes you realize the power that NGOs can have when they use legal framework to champion social justice.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another important aspect, the legal framework that governs NGOs in India. You see, while their independence is really crucial, there also needs to be a system of checks and balances to make sure that everything is transparent and they're held accountable.
That makes a lot of sense. So what are the key legal mechanisms that keep NGOs in check? I'm guessing there must be some regulations to manage their diverse funding sources, especially when it comes from abroad.
You're right. Two very important acts actually govern how NGOs function. The Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, or FCRA, from 2010, and the Foreign Exchange Management Act of 1999, often called FEMA. The FCRA specifically addresses foreign funding, laying out guidelines on how NGOs can actually receive and use those funds from international sources. It's really about maintaining transparency and preventing the misuse of funds for activities that might not be aligned with national interests.
So the FCRA is like a watchdog, ensuring that foreign funding is used responsibly and for its intended purpose. What about FEMA? How does that play into all this?
Well, FEMA casts a wider net. It regulates a much broader spectrum of financial transactions that involve foreign exchange. This ensures that all financial dealings of NGOs, even those not directly related to foreign funding, are conducted legally and ethically.
Okay, so we've got these legal frameworks in place to promote responsible financial practices. But here's a fact that I found a little unsettling. Only about 10% of NGOs in India actually submit their financial statements. What does that low compliance rate tell us?
Yeah, that is a valid concern. While the majority of NGOs do operate with integrity, this lack of financial transparency does raise some questions about accountability within the entire sector. It undermines public trust and potentially makes it harder for legitimate organizations to get the funding and support that they need. It can also create more skepticism, leading to concerns about potential misuse of funds and a lack of oversight.
It seems a little like a paradox. We have these legal frameworks in place to ensure accountability, yet a large number of NGOs aren't even adhering to the basic requirement of financial reporting.
It definitely highlights a gap that needs to be addressed. Transparency is not just about compliance, it's about building credibility and fostering a culture of accountability. And without that, the reputation of the entire sector can suffer, even if most of them are doing really commendable work.
Right. So we've established the importance of transparency and the legal systems that are in place. Now let's shift our focus to an area where NGOs have played a really big role: the environment. India faces so many environmental problems, from pollution to deforestation to climate change. How are NGOs stepping up to tackle these issues?
Environmental NGOs in India really do wear a lot of hats. They conduct research that informs policy decisions, they advocate for tougher environmental regulations, and they try to raise public awareness about these pressing environmental issues. But their impact goes way beyond lobbying and research. They work directly with communities, empowering them to adopt sustainable practices and to become active participants in environmental conservation.
From what we found in our research, some big names in the Indian environmental NGO scene are the Bombay Natural History Society, the Center for Science and Environment, and the Narmada Baka Andolan. It seems like each organization has its own unique approach to environmental advocacy.
Yeah, you're right. The Bombay Natural History Society, for example, has been a leader in wildlife conservation for decades, dedicated to research and advocating for the protection of endangered species. Their work has been instrumental in shaping conservation policies and raising awareness about how important biodiversity is. The Center for Science and Environment, on the other hand, is more focused on policy research and advocacy, pushing for sustainable development practices and making sure that polluters are held accountable. Their in-depth research and their hard-hitting reports have exposed a lot of environmental wrongdoings and have really pushed for policy changes.
And then you have the Narmada Baka Andolan, which has taken a more grassroots approach, mobilizing communities that have been affected by these large-scale dam projects. They've been vocal about the social and environmental costs of those projects, advocating for the rights of communities that have been displaced, and pushing for more sustainable and equitable development models. Their activism has brought a lot of much-needed attention to the human cost of development and highlighted the need for a more inclusive approach.
Their persistence and their commitment have made them a strong voice in the debate around development and displacement. And their work has also helped to bring about policy changes and push for more equitable rehabilitation and resettlement processes.
It's inspiring to see how these organizations, each with its own way of doing things, are working to protect India's environment. They're taking on these challenges from different angles, whether it's through scientific research policy advocacy or just mobilizing people on the ground.
It really shows the diversity of the NGO sector and the power of people coming together for a common cause. These organizations and countless others are playing a big role in shaping India's environmental future. But while their work is definitely commendable, it's also important to acknowledge the challenges they face. It's not always easy, and there are limitations and criticisms that need to be addressed.
You're right. It's easy to focus on the inspiring stories of how much they're accomplishing, but there's always two sides to every story.
What are some of the criticisms that NGOs face, particularly those working in India? One big criticism is the difference in funding. Some NGOs, especially those with support from overseas, have access to a lot of resources, while others are struggling to stay afloat. This can create an uneven playing field and hinder the growth and effectiveness of smaller grassroots organizations that often have a better understanding of what local communities need, but don't have the financial means to scale up their operations.
Yeah, we've all heard those stories of NGOs almost becoming like these mini MNCs with giant budgets and international operations. But doesn't that raise concerns about their priorities and whether they're really connected to the communities they're supposed to be serving?
It definitely does. The potential for misuse of those funds is another valid criticism. While most NGOs are operating with integrity, there have been cases of financial mismanagement and even corruption, which ends up hurting the reputation of the whole sector. Not only does this divert resources away from people who really need them, but it also erodes public trust, making it harder for legitimate organizations to get funding and do their work effectively.
It's really disheartening when things like that happen. It damages the credibility of everyone in the sector and casts doubt on all the genuinely good work that so many dedicated people and organizations are doing.
Exactly. Transparency and accountability are essential to maintain public confidence. When you hear about those allegations of financial wrongdoing, it really emphasizes the need for more scrutiny and strengthens the arguments of those who are already skeptical of NGOs.
So it's not just about whether funds are actually being misused, but also the perception it creates. It erodes trust and makes it harder for all NGOs to function properly, even the ones that are committed to being open and ethical.
Exactly. It highlights how important it is for the sector to regulate itself, to have strong internal control mechanisms, and to be willing to embrace transparency as a core value.
All right. We've gone into some of the criticisms and the challenges that NGOs are facing, which paints a more realistic picture of how complex the sector is. But let's not end things on a down note. Given all of these hurdles, what can be done to make the NGO sector in India stronger and ensure that it's sustainable and effective for the long haul? What solutions are people talking about, and how can we work together to create a more robust and impactful NGO ecosystem?
There's no one-size-fits-all answer, but there are several key areas where we can make a real difference. One is capacity building. Many NGOs, especially the smaller ones, lack the skills and resources to manage their finances, run impactful projects, and navigate all the complex rules and regulations. Providing training and support in these areas can help them work more efficiently and have a greater impact.
So it's about giving them the tools and the knowledge they need to succeed, not just financially, but also in terms of how well their organization runs and how they plan strategically.
Exactly. It's about giving them the power to become more self-sufficient and resilient. And it's not just about the technical stuff. Developing leadership skills and promoting a culture of innovation and learning within those NGOs is important too.
That makes sense. Equipping them with the right skills and mindset is really important for their long-term success. What other solutions are out there?
Another important area is access to expert advice. NGOs often run into these really complex problems that require specific knowledge in things like law, finance, or project management. Connecting them with people who have experience in these areas can help them make better decisions, navigate tricky situations, and develop better strategies.
So it's like having a mentor, someone who's been there and done that, to guide them through all the complicated parts of their work.
Exactly. This kind of mentorship can be super valuable, especially for smaller NGOs that might not be able to afford full-time experts. And it doesn't have to be a formal, long-term thing. Even just some short consultations or access to a network of experts can make a big difference.
That's a really good point. It's about providing support right when and where it's needed most.
And we can't forget about how powerful technology can be. From websites and social media to data analysis and online fundraising platforms, technology can totally change the way NGOs work and how they connect with the rest of the world.
It's about embracing the digital age and using its potential to broaden their reach, streamline their operations, and connect with a much bigger audience.
Definitely. NGOs need to be digitally savvy, not just to keep up with the times, but to really take advantage of what technology has to offer so they can increase their impact and reach a global audience.
So we've got capacity building, access to experts, and using technology. These are all proactive ways to make the NGO sector stronger. What about volunteering? We've talked about getting more young people involved in social work. How do we actually make that happen?
It's about creating opportunities where they can really make a difference, not just symbolic gestures. Young people are more likely to volunteer their time and skills if they feel like they're making a real contribution. Their voices are being heard, and their skills are valued. It's about creating volunteer roles that are challenging, rewarding, and aligned with their interests and passions.
So we need to move beyond that old way of thinking about volunteering where young people are just given simple tasks. We need to create chances for them to really take charge, lead projects, and contribute their own unique skills and ideas.
Exactly. And it's not just about the tasks themselves, it's about fostering a supportive environment where young volunteers feel appreciated, their contributions are recognized, and they have opportunities to learn and grow. Things like mentoring programs, skill-building workshops, and networking events can make their volunteering experience even better and give them valuable skills that will be useful in their careers.
It's about building a sense of community and belonging, where young people feel like they're part of something bigger, working alongside other passionate individuals who are committed to making a difference.
And we shouldn't forget about the role of schools and universities in promoting a sense of civic engagement. Adding social work into the curriculum, encouraging students to lead their own initiatives, and partnering with local NGOs can create a more immersive experience. This allows students to apply what they've learned in real-world settings.
It's about moving away from just focusing on academics and towards a more well-rounded approach to education that emphasizes the importance of being an active citizen and being socially responsible.
Exactly. It's about raising a generation that's not just knowledgeable, but also compassionate, engaged, and ready to create positive change in their communities and the world as a whole. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of NGOs. We were just discussing how technology can be a real game changer for them, allowing them to connect with a global audience and really make their operations more efficient.
Yeah, it is incredible to think how something like just a website or a social media campaign can really get an NGO's message out there and connect them with potential supporters, volunteers, even donors from all over the world. But with this wider reach comes, a whole new level of complexity, especially when it comes to foreign funding.
Right. That's a key point. The increase in foreign funding has been a huge help to a lot of NGOs. It's allowed them to expand what they do and take on bigger projects. But it's also led to some concerns about transparency and accountability. And it's sparked some debates about potential foreign influence and whether NGO activities are aligned with what's best for the country.
Yeah, there's a delicate balance between welcoming international support and making sure that NGOs are still focused on the needs and priorities of their own communities. It's a sensitive issue that requires careful thought and strong regulations.
Absolutely. And that's where the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, or FCRA, comes in. The FCRA isn't about stopping foreign funding. It's about setting clear rules for how those funds can be received and used responsibly. It's about making sure that those contributions from abroad are used for the right reasons, align with what the NGO is trying to achieve, and don't compromise the interests of the country.
So the FCRA is more like a safeguard than a roadblock.
Mm.
It's about promoting transparency and accountability, not preventing international collaboration. But even with these rules in place, the question of accountability goes beyond just following the rules. How do we make sure that NGOs are really answerable for their actions and how they use their resources, especially the ones coming from overseas?
That's where the idea of self-regulation becomes really important. While oversight from government agencies is important, NGOs also need to embrace those internal mechanisms for accountability. This means establishing clear policies for how they manage their finances, developing systems for monitoring and evaluating their work, and just fostering a culture of transparency within the organization.
So it's about building that system of checks and balances from within, making sure there's a culture of responsibility that goes beyond just checking off boxes on a compliance checklist.
Exactly. And this includes having an active and independent board to provide oversight. They scrutinize financial decisions and make sure the NGO is actually sticking to its mission and values. It's about showing a real commitment to doing things ethically and managing resources responsibly, not just to outside stakeholders, but also to the communities they're working with.
That makes a lot of sense. A strong internal structure not only makes them more accountable, but it also builds trust with donors, partners, and the public. It's about showing that they are committed to being transparent and responsible in everything they do. Speaking of public perception, another challenge that often comes up is this disconnect between NGOs and younger generations. Why do you think there's a lack of interest in volunteering among young people, especially with all this focus on social awareness and activism we're seeing lately?
It's a complicated issue with several factors at play. One is the pressure young people face to excel academically and professionally. With so much competition in the job market and the rising cost of education, many find themselves consumed with getting good grades and securing their future. It leaves very little time or energy for volunteer work.
It's like they're constantly told to focus on building their resume and securing their future, which doesn't leave much room for actually exploring social causes or doing unpaid work, even if it aligns with their values.
Exactly. And there's this perception that social work isn't a real career path. A lot of young people are encouraged to go for those traditional, well-established careers in fields like engineering, medicine, or finance. Those are seen as more stable, more lucrative, and just more prestigious. Social work, on the other hand, can be perceived as emotionally draining, financially unstable, and without a clear path for career advancement.
So it's a combination of practical limitations and just societal perceptions that shape how they make choices and what they prioritize. It's not that they aren't interested in social causes, but maybe they're not aware of the different career paths that exist within the nonprofit world and the skills and experiences they can gain through volunteering.
You're exactly right. We need to do a better job of highlighting the personal and professional rewards of working in these fields. Volunteering and working in the nonprofit sector can provide young people with valuable skills, from project management and communication to critical thinking and problem solving. It exposes them to different perspectives, helps them develop empathy, and gives them a sense of purpose and fulfillment that's often missing in those more conventional career paths.
So it's about changing the narrative and emphasizing those transferable skills and personal growth that comes with doing social work. It's about showing young people that they can actually make a difference while building a fulfilling and meaningful career.
Absolutely. We need to get rid of that stereotype of social work being just about being altruistic. We need to show them the diverse career opportunities that exist within the sector. From program management and fundraising to advocacy and research, there are all kinds of roles that require specialized skills and offer opportunities for career advancement.
And let's not forget about the personal satisfaction that comes from knowing you're having a positive impact on other people's lives and contributing to a cause you really believe in. It's about finding that sense of purpose and making a difference, which is something a lot of young people are looking for in their careers. Speaking of making a difference, we've talked a lot about the challenges that NGOs face in India. But let's focus on the solutions. What are some concrete things we can do to strengthen the NGO sector and help it be more effective in addressing all the different challenges India is facing?
One area where we can really make progress is capacity building. Like we talked about earlier, many NGOs, especially the smaller ones, don't have the resources and expertise to be as